with that. So this is my laptop. It's pretty decent, but it has one problem. So this laptop comes with an SSD, more specifically an nvme. So now the benefit of that is it makes the experience of running the operating system on here silky smooth. The big problem I have is I don't just run Linux or Windows. I run both of them on this laptop, and this SSD or NVMe is only 500 gigs. The nice thing about this laptop is it has a second SSD slot. The second SSD slot is going to be the home of our new 1TB SSD that supports laptops. Now it always surprises me when I open up the packaging and think I'm getting 1TB of storage here to pull out the drive and realize it's such a tiny little drive. What a world we live in where you can get 1TB of storage in such a small form factor. There you go, there she is. Let's get this inside the laptop. We're going to have to do that by taking out a few screws. Remember, don't lose this screw over here. I'm going to start taking them out one by one. When you're doing this process, just arrange them in an order so that you can find out which screw goes where when you put everything back together. Next, you can use a card to pop the clips out so you can get the back cover of the laptop off. And there you go. Now you'll see your computer's guts.
Oh yeah.
And on this side, under the flap here, is my old SSD, the 500 gig one. On this other side here is where the new 1TB SSD is going to go. The screw here holds down the SSD with this by this notch here, and this slot here is keyed so that you can only put in the SSD one way. So we're going to take the screw out of here and we're going to put in the SSD. You're going to do this by pressing gently but firmly to put the SSD in. When you do this process though, just make sure that you disconnect your battery. I was lucky and didn't short anything, but you could if you don't disconnect your battery. So just try and do that just so that you are safe when you do this. So I screwed this down, and once everything was securely in place, it's now time for us to close up the laptop. So we're going to say bye-bye, and we're going to close this thing up. Let's just pop all the clips in. And once we're done popping in all the clips, we'll go ahead and put no, we're not going to do that. You want to first check that everything is working before you start putting any screws in, just in case you need to open up the laptop again. So we're going to boot it up, and here you can see it. It's alive and well inside of the operating system. Now we can pop all of our screws back in. And if you put these in an order, you'll know which way they're supposed to go back in, and you won't end up losing a screw like me. Okay, let's start clearing up some space here. First things first, I'm going to disable the recovery partition because I want to just move things around a bit so I can actually get all the space back. So when we disable the recovery partition, it's going to create this file here called winre.wim inside of this location. Pause the video and check that you have that file in that location. Then you know you've done this correctly. Then let's select the disk that we need to work with, the 1TB, and let's start getting rid of the partitions that we don't want. For me, I have a few extra recovery partitions that I don't want and my old Linux installation. So I'm just going to go through deleting all of those partitions one by one, so I'm only left with a partition that I want to extend, which for me is partition 3. Now you'll see I have 687 gigs here that I want to use. So I'll do a calculation here and do that times 1024, and I'll see what's the value that I want to put in megabytes here into the extend command so that I can get everything except for 1 gig. And if I go and run that command here, but just remember you also need to remove the space over here, then I would have had all the space used as expected, but just this 1 gig left, which I'll use for the recovery partition. So if we go back into diskpart now, and we go and create the primary partition for this particular recovery partition, we can also format it so that it is NTFS formatted. Then it wouldn't be Windows, we wouldn't have to put in some arbitrary GUID to make this a recovery partition, and also give it some hexadecimal GPT attributes, because that's really intuitive to do. But after we've done all of that, when we run this reagent enable, it'll automatically pick up that that drive is for the recovery partition, and then our recovery partition will be enabled again. When it comes to the Linux portion here, I use a type of Linux called NixOS. So I just backed up my files, which weren't many that I had to back up, rebuilt my configuration, and obviously this is in fast forward, but once it rebuilt it, I was able to boot up my computer. I had my custom grub boot menu here set up, and booted into my system and got greeted by a login screen as per usual. So it feels like nothing actually happened. Thank you for helping me tear my laptop apart and put it back together again. I really appreciate it. We covered a lot today. We replaced a SSD. We messed around with Windows partitioning, which was pretty complicated in my opinion. And then we also messed around with my version of Linux, NixOS, and we saw the value of it restoring all my settings to exactly the way I had them before I ever messed with the SSD in the first place. It's like nothing ever happened. So if you found value out of that, you know which buttons to press. But until next time, you'll find my next video over here.